Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Maseches Rosh Hashana Daf Ted Vav, number 15. Again, I had to share this morning with the older gentleman. Um, One guy told me that he eats noodles for breakfast. I don't know, it's interesting to me. Never ate noodles for breakfast. Lunch, I actually did have noodles today. We're going to play again Where's Waldo with Shmuel. Shmuel actually flew to America so he can pick me up in a limo when I come on Tuesday. He didn't fly. He's not going anywhere. But I am. See you in New York. Last year from Israel tomorrow. All right. The Gemara says, Ted Vav and Aleph on the top, about the fifth line down. Ma'ishna hasam nitani im haisa shniya nechnes l'shlishis. Ma'ishna hacha dekasani im haisa shlishis nechnes l'revius. We had a brisa on Daf Yud Beis, which talked about, or we're talking about different cases where we're not sure where you take off, what you take off from what Trumas Meiser you take off Meiser Ani, which is the third year. You take off Meiser Sheni, which is the second and the fourth year. So one brisa talked about the second year going into the third year, and one brisa by Esrog, yesterday's Gemara, talked about the third year going into the fourth year. Why did it change? What's the difference? The Gemara's Milsa Agavorchim Mashma the Esrog Kashale Yada. Esrog, everyone wants to get their hands on. They want to check out the best esrog with no baletlach and no black dots. And they want to get a cheap one, the most muhudr one for 20 shekel. So they go to the fields, they go to the orchards, and they pick them themselves. I don't know if this still applies. There are people that watch them. But Shvius, you can't really watch your fruits. So this year, people go to the orchard, they can get their hands on it. So if they get their hands on the esrogim, they ruin the tree, and the tree is not going to reissue fruits until the third year of the cycle. That's why it says the third year going to the fourth year. It's not shaykh, the second year going into the third year. When is the Rosh Hashana for an esrog? We talked about this earlier at the end of yesterday. Amalei Shvat. He said Shvat, like we said yesterday. Shvat the Chadashim or Shvat the Tkufa? Is it the Shvat of the Jewish months, normally we call Shvat, or of the Tkufa? Roughly, Shvat would really correspond with February in the solar year. Is it February? So therefore, if Shvat of the Chadashim fell out in January, do you go by February? Only the Chadashim. You go after the Jewish year. Let's say it was a leap year, so you added extra Adar. Do you consider Tu B'Shvat on actually Tu B'Shvat or on Ted Vav of the first Adar? So he answers, you go after most years, only 7 out of 19 years are leap years, 12 out of 19 years are not. So most years you go by Shvat, so even during a leap year you go by Tu B'Shvat. I'm a Rabbah, Esrog Bashishis, so let's say you have an Esrog that emerges in the 6th year, but it's not picked until the 7th year. Ptura min ma'aser, ptura min bir. It's exempt from ma'asos. We treat it like 7th year produce, where there's no shumas and ma'asos on Shvius because it's ownerless. Things which are ownerless, no hefker, there's no shumas and ma'asos. Ptura min bir. It's also exempt from bir. Bir means on fruits that are Shvius, you have to take them out of your house. You have to declare them ownerless once the animals in the field don't have that fruit to nash on anymore. Meaning, Hilchos Shvius apply to it. If the Chanata, the emergence happened in the 7th year, so it's exempt from Meiser because it's Shvius. The Chayeves B'Bir, it's Chayev and Bir. It has the dinim of Bir, of Shemitah. Amalei Abai Bishlam Seifa L'Chumra. The Seifa we go L'Chumra. That's why. One second. Let's go back for a second. I'm a Rabbah. Esrog Bashish is Ptura min Ma'aser, Ptura min Bir. It's exempt from Ma'aser, exempt from Bir. Bashvi is Ptura min Ma'aser, Chayes Bir. Amalei Abai Bishlam Seifa L'Chumra. The Seifa of Rabbah's statement is L'Chumra, because he says that you have to be machmer. You have to, even though it emerged during the 7th year, we treat it The eighth year fruit, it's pater min abir. We don't consider it shvius fruit, even though it emerged during the seventh year. Ela reisha ptura min abir. The reisha, the first case, is shishish nichzis al shvius. Why is it exempt from beer? The reason you say, obviously, it's pater from beer is because you go after the emergence. It was during the sixth year, so it's not shvius fruit. Then 6 year fruit should be chayiv maser. Amalei yada kol mashim bav ad amar tichayiv meiser. He says the reality is, even though it emerges during the sixth year, and now when it's plucked from the tree, it's the seventh year. And since we know in shvius you have to open your field to everybody declared ownerless, so everyone's getting their hands on it. Since everyone's getting their hands on it, so therefore it becomes ownerless. It becomes like it's ownerless because anyone could just take it. So therefore, technically, it has the din of hefker, not because of shvius, not because of the din of shvius, just because it's hefker, because everyone's touching a esrogim tree, so it's kilo is like hefker. So therefore, hefker is pater from shumos and maestros. Rav Hamnuna argues on Rabba. Amar bashish and shvius the olam shishis. He says it's always considered both for shvius and meiser. It's considered to be a shishis fruit, meaning it's chayiv and shumos and maestros, but it's not a shayach to shvius laws. About shvius, if it's a seventh year fruit that emerged in the seventh year and is picked in the eighth year, the olam shvius. It has the name of shvius, meaning beer is shayach to it, but there's no shumas and maishos. Meisvei Rishon ben Yehuda Omer Mishum Shimon Esrog Bashishis Shinichneses l'shvius Ptura min ma'aser or Ptura min beer. If it's sixth year going to seventh year, it's pater both mishumas and maishos and exempt from beer. She'ein lechadavar shechayiv ma'aser elam ken gadol b'chiyav v'nilkat b'chiyav. Ba'shvius shnichsa l'shmius ptura min ma'aser or ptura min beer. Again, if it's seventh year going to eighth year, it's exempt from maishos and exempt from beer. She'ein lechadavar shechayiv beer elam ken gadol b'shvius v'nilkat b'shvius. Basically, Rav Shimon Yehuda is very makel over here. He says the sixth going to the seventh year is exempt from ma'aser. Why is it exempt from ma'aser? Because you had to call him a mashmil. We saw this story before that it wasn't plucked until the seventh year, so everyone touches it. It's like hefker. Hefker is pater from shmuz and meisos. It's pater from beer because that goes after you go after chanata when it emerges and emerges in the sixth year. It's not shvius fruit. And the seifa where he said about shvius shminis pturim min meiser pturim min beer. It's understandable why it's pater min meiser because it's shvius emerged during shvius, so it's shvius fruit. Pturim min beer. Why is it pater from beer? That requires a little bit of svara. It's pater from beer because now we're talking about the eighth year. Beer only is shayach during Shemitah. Beer is you have to make ownerless what's in your house when it becomes desolate for the animals in the field. For that for that type of fruit, it doesn't exist for the animals in the field. You have to make it ownerless. You only have to make something ownerless on Shemitah year itself. After the eighth year, Shimon holds. You don't have to. Shimon Yehuda holds. You don't have to make it ownerless anymore. So the Gemara is the Reisha Kasha. This is a Bryce. Reisha Kasha Rav Nuna. Seifa Kasha Ben Rab Ben Rav Nuna. The Reisha is a question of Rav Nuna. Rav Nuna was a second Amor who said something. He said he was mechayivit. Rav Nuna said, what did Rav Nuna say? Amar Bashish Shvius the Olam Shishis. It's Shishis, and so therefore, even though it's pater and beer, it's still chayiv and shmuz and maestros. And Rishon Yehuda said it's pater and everything, which is pater and shmuz and maestros. And the seifa is a question both on Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna because Rabbah said esrog b'shish shmuz l'shvius turam and meiser turam and beer b'shvius shmuz l'shvius turam and meiser the chayev is beer. Again, he says it's pater and meiser chayev is beer. Both Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna agree. A seventh year fruit going to the eighth year, meaning it was emerged in the seventh year, and it was picked in the eighth year, it's at least chayiv and beer. Shvius applies to it. Ma'aser doesn't apply to it because it emerged during Shemitah year, where everything's hefker. So this price is a question of both Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna. Tanahi. So the more answers try to answer this. It's a machlokes tanoim, meaning Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna find their source to be mekel, to be machmer actually. From a different opinion of a Tana. The Sanya Amar Rabbi Yossi of Tulumus. Yossi of Tulumus, hey Mishum Chamishas Kenim. He brought a proof from Chamishas Kenim. Esrog Achel Lakitas Meister. Esrog follows Lakita when it's plucked from the tree in terms of maestros. Meaning if it was plucked during the seventh year, it would be pater and shumas and maestros. and it was plucked during the 8th year, it would be chayav. Rabbeinu ninu b'usha v'amru achli taso bein l'maiser bein l'shvius. Rabbeinu argued on Rav Yossi of Tulumus. They said it goes after Lakita both for Meiser and both for Shvius. Like my answer is, they were asked, Shvius man dechar shmei. This is a little weird that Rabbeinu mentioned Shvius. Tanakama, Rav Yossi of Tulumus, didn't mention anything about Shvius. So my answer is, Tedvavam Vez Chasuri Mechsera V'hachi Kasan. We're missing part of the Bryce. V'hachi Kasan Esra Gachli Lakita so L'Maiser V'achanato L'Shvius. Rav Yossi of Tulumus was made which really is a shita of earlier. We said Rav Gamliel's shita that you go after Lakita for Meiser. That the esrog, it depends on when you pluck it from the tree in terms of Meiser, but in terms of Shvius, it goes after the Chanato. Rabbeinu argue on him. They have a third shita, not Rabbi Lezer. Lezer says it's always for all dinim. An esrog is like an elam. It's always after Chanata. Rav Gamliel says that for Meiser, you go after Lakita, and Rabbeinu B'Usha have a third shita. They say both for Shvius and for Meiser, you go after Lakita. Anyway, the point is that Rabba and Rav Hamnuna agree with Rav Yossi of Tulumus or Rabbi Gamliel. They're the same shita, and they would say you find the Tanaic support over here that that Meiser is after the Lakita. So therefore, if it was picked in the 8th year, as Shumas and Maestros, after the 8th year, it was picked in the 7th year, it's Pater for Shumas and Maestros. And for Shvius, you go after Chanata, so therefore if it emerged during the 7th year, then Shvius would apply to it. If it emerged during the 6th year or the 8th year, then Shumas and Maestros would apply to it. So you can fit it back into Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna. The reason, for example, we'll take Rav Hamnuna over here. Rav Hamnuna, so we'll take Rabbah over here. Rabbah said, where's Rabbah? Rabbah says, Esrog Bashish Shnechsa L'Shvius P'tura Min HaMaiser P'tura Biro. Bashvius Shnechsa L'Shvius P'tura Meiser. If it's 7th year going to 8th year, it's exempt from Meiser. Why is it exempt from Meiser? Because it's Shvius fruit. Like yes, for Shvius, like we saw, Rav Gamliel or Yosef and Abtullah must go after Chanata. The Chayev is a biur, and it's Chayev in biur. It's Chayev in biur because it emerged during the 7th year. In the 7th year, Shvius, you go after the Chanata, and it's P'tura Mimaiser because this will be a little bit of a stira problem over here because according to the Yosef Tulumus, he says you go after the Lakita, and Lakita is really in the 8th year, so why should you put from Meiser? It's a little bit of a question. This answer of the Gemara is not so clear because it also doesn't answer Rabbah's shita, Rav Hamnuna's shita, where there's two questions in Rav Hamnuna from Shimon Bar Yehuda. It's not so clear. Checking the art scroll and then notes how they resolve all these things. It's very complicated. We're going to leave it for now. But basically, we're saying that Rosh Shimon Yehuda is the opinion of the Rabbeinu B'Usha, and Rabbeinu B'Usha said that you always go after L'chitaso bein l'maiser bein l'shvius. So therefore, that's why they said that if it was plucked during Shminis, it was plucked in the 8th year, so therefore you go after, it's not considered Shvius fruit because it was plucked during the 8th year. That was the big chiddush of Rosh Bar Yehuda. If it's plucked, that was the big chiddush of Rosh Bar Yehuda. That's really where the Gemara is asking from. And he says if it was a 7th year fruit that would emerge in the 7th year and it's plucked during the 8th year, it has no hilchos or no Shvius applies to it. Meanwhile, Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna really held that Shemitah does apply to it, even because it emerges in the 7th year. He held no, because Roseina B'Usha, Rosh Shimon Yehuda held like Roseina B'Usha, that you go Shvius, you go after the Lakita. When it's plucked, it was plucked in the 8th year, so Shemitah doesn't apply to it. We had previously explained the reasoning before is because it's not Shaykh. Biur the 8th year, the Gemara has now been Machadish a new thing. Rosh Shimon Bar Yehuda would agree with the Rabbi Senish B'Usha is because the Lakita is during the 8th year. This is something that Rav Yosef Tulumus argues on. That really is the question. The main question really here is from this last part in the Brisa. You don't have to get into the whole art scroll. is Shminis. Why? If it emerges during during Shvius, but it's plucked during Shminis, is it potter from Biur? It's Shemitah fruit. The answer is because Rabbi Shusha say you bought Shalakita also for Shvius fruit. It was plucked during the 8th year, so it's not Shemitah fruit. And Yossi of Tulamus agrees with Rabba and Rav Nuna that it goes after the 7th year, which is Chanata, which is a Shita Rangamliel, emerging in the 7th year. Shemitah does apply to it. Itmar Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish Amrita Vayu. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both say Esrog Bashishis Shnichsel Shvius the Olam Shishis. It always has din of Shishis, both regarding Shvius. It's considered not Shvius because it's when it emerged, and it's also Trumas and Maestros because again it emerged in the 6th year. Kiasa, this is like the Shita of Rabbi Lazar. Kiasa Ravin, Amar Yochanan Esrog Bashish Shnichsel Shvius. I feel like Kizayas Venasas Kikar. Even if it only emerged the olive amount of the esrog, the size of an olive, the esrog is a very small esrog, and after Tu B'Shvat, going to Shvius, it became a kikar, chayav and aleh mishum tevel. It's chayav mishum tevel, meaning it takes on the din of shumas and maestros, you're chayav and shumas and maestros, because it emerged during this, because it Esher Bashisha Nichtel Shvius, I feel like Kazayas when asked the kikar chayav and aleh mishum tevel, because it emerged during the 6th year, so therefore shumas and maestros go after the chanata. Like Shita Shrabelez that we saw that Elon Shava that Esrog Shavel Elon Lechol Davar. Tanraban Elon Shachantu Perosav Kodem to Bishvat. And Elon, where the fruits emerge before Tu Bishvat, Mesasa Lashana Sha'avra. The Shuas and Maisos are calculated with the previous year. Achar Tu Bishvat, if the fruits emerge after Tu Bishvat, Mesasa Lashana Abba, then you calculate the following year. Amar Nechemia Medram Murim Elon shows the Shtei Brechos. Hashana. Let's talk about a tree that has 2 broods, meaning it has 2 different offsprings, 2 different sets of fruits during the year. The Gemara says, "Shtei brechos akadaita," 2 sets of offspring. It's really only used regarding birds. They have 2 broods. They have some pigeons at one point in the year, then another batch of pigeons at another point in the year. It doesn't really apply to trees. Ela ema kain shtei brechos, meaning it's a type of tree where the fruit is not all ripened at once. It gets ripened in parts. Certain parts get ripened earlier. Certain parts of the tree get ripened later, like a fig tree, for example. So then, Rabbi Nechemia rules that this is only talking about a tree like that, a fig tree or something like that, that has kein shtei brechos. Then you go after the chanata, you go after when it emerges. Otherwise, you go after the lakita. It's a big chiddush. Normally, we assume the fruit tree you go after emergence. Here, Rabbi Nechemia is saying that only applies when it has fruit that ripens at different points. Aval Ilan, also brecha akas going to call him v'zeisim charuvim, palm trees, olive trees, and carob trees. Al pishachan to saying according to b'shvat, even though all the fruits emerge before tu b'shvat, misasran l'shana haba, they're calculated when you do the lakita, when you pick it from the. This is a new chiddush from Nechemia. Amar Rabbi Yochanan and Nagu am charuvim Rabbi Nechemia. Rabbi Yochanan says actually the minhag makom in one of the places was the follower of Nechem's opinion regarding carob trees that you go after the lakita and not the chanata. White figs, even in the 2nd year of the cycle, I mean you have the 7th year, then you have the 1st year, the 2nd year, because like I mentioned, fig trees take a long time to ripen. So it was grown during and emerged during the 7th year. It didn't mature the figs until the 2nd year of the cycle. It's still Shvius applies to them because they started to emerge during that time. So that's the question of Rabbi Yochanan. How could you say that they followed Becharuvin like Rabbi Nechemia, right? That you go after Lakita. We see here a clear brayso that Shvius you go after the Chanata. The Chanata was during Shvius. So even though they fully ripened during the 2nd year, your harvest is in the 2nd year of the cycle, they still have the din of Peros Shvius. Ishtik, he was quiet. Rabbi Yochanan didn't answer. Only Rabbi Abba, Kohen, Rabbi Yossi, Kohen. My Ishtik, why is Rabbi Yochanan silent to Reish Lakish's question? You're asking from the Rabbanan. I said Rabbi Nechemia. This place passed like Rabbi Nechemia. So the Gemara says, Mishum da Amalei Shavas Rabbanim Avak Rab Nechemi. The reason Rish Yochanan didn't answer that is because Rish Lakish would retort to him, why are you following, why are these people following Rab Nechemi, which follow the Rabbanim? Rab Nechemi is a Yachid compared to the Rabbim. V'lei Malei Kamina Lach Nagu Baramar Li Yisura. Rabbi Yochanan had a different answer. You could have said, yeah, they did a minhag. You're telling me this, right? It's aser. It's aser. It really goes by chanata. But the minhag, there were no way to go after the kita. So the Gemara said, because Reish Lakish would say back to Rabbi Yochanan, if it's really aser, would we allow people to follow a minhag like that? It's mashma that they followed the minhag and no one made a protest. No one made a chas, so it was okay. Another retort Yochanan could have said to Reish Lakish. He could have said, why was he quiet? He could have said, I was talking about carrots, which the Shumas and Mais is only the Rabbanon. You're talking about Shvius of these figs. That Shvius is in the rice. Shumas and Mais by things which are not Dagan Tiro Shvius are only the Rabbanon. Shvius is the Raisa. Shvius we go after the Chanata. Otherwise, the Rabbanon were making. They say you go after the Kita. Alama Rabbi Yaba Kohen Tamheni Im Hishiv Reish Lakish Shuvazu. I'm not sure if Reish Lakish, based on this previous suggestion that Rabbi Yochanan could have asked Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan could have retorted to Reish Lakish. I'm not sure if Reish Lakish really asked this question. The Gemara says, Imi Shiva ha'usva. The facts was, we did hear that he actually asked this question to Rabbi Yochanan. Ela ema im kibla Rabbi Yochanan im lo kibla. We're not sure if Rabbi Yochanan, when he was silent to Reish Lakish, it was because it was such a good question and no answers to it, or because it was such an obvious answer. Maybe like the Gemara suggests that Charuvin and Rabbanan and Shvius Daraisa, therefore there's a distinction between the two. I want to add a little, with Ben Sion. The Gemara really states over here. The Gemara says, the Gemara has a line. The Gemara wanted to say maybe Rabbi Yochanan really had a good retort. Because he could have said, "You're telling me it's aser." Kamina lach nagwa amar li surah. Rabbi Yochanan could have said, I'm telling you the minhag makom was to go after the kita. And you're telling me Isser, meaning go after the chanata. The minhag was, what kind of havamina is it? And the Gemara really goes back, and the Gemara says, would we let them do the shafkina? Seems the Gemara, at least at a havamina, you can ask whether the maskana, the Gemara goes back on this, but at least the havamina, the Gemara seems to say something really crazy, that even though it's aser, you're allowed to have a minhag that's connected the halacha. A minhag connected the halacha. How could that be? And the Gemara's maskana is really, you're right. If it's a minhag against the halacha, how could we let them do it? It's all going on over here. What's havamina? What's the maskana? I want to say over here that there's a klal in Chazal that halacha, a gzeira of the Rabbanan is only niskayim and only could be established as a permanent gzeira in rova sibur yichol namabo. If most of the populace is able to hold by this, if they're able to deal with it, they're able to live normal lives with this. If the Rabbanan goes or something that's against people's normalcy or against people's actions, they have no rights to do that. And maybe that's to have me the Gemara. The Gemara said, who cares if it's us? Who cares if they went after Chanata? Really, the minhag makom, let's go after the kita, because it was hard for them. The fig trees were giving off. The carob trees had one break, and it was much easier to take Oshumas and Maestros after the Lakita than the Chanata. It's much easier for people. It's much harder to go after the Chanata, and obviously we'll see at the end of the Gemara it's only a din Rabbanan, so therefore it's a Gzera Rabbanan over here. It was much easier for the people to go after the Lakita than go after the Chanata. It's a Gzera, they went after the Chanata, it's a Gzera Rabbanan, She'ena Sibur Yechol Na'amud Bo. What's the maskana of the Gemara? The Gemara says, do we allow it? So it says in parentheses lay. There's a little base over here, shafkinan lahu. So what's really the subject there? Shafkinan lay. Shafkinan lay is to a singular person. It would be saying shafkinan lay lahu would be, are we going to allow the people to do that? Shafkinan lay, would we allow Rabbi Yochanan to say such a thing? uh, maybe Rabbi Yochanan was present in that place of the Charuvin. So that's the way our school learns Shavkinale. When you, Rabbi Yochanan, allow them to act that way. But you could read a Shavkinan Lahu, and this is really the way the Masoras Hashas fixes it up. Shavkinan Lahu, meaning not that what they did was wrong, is that we try to make a macha, even though really a gzeira shenei chol na'amud bo, you have to test it, right? You make the gzeira. Now the sibur is not yachol. The sibur doesn't follow the gzeira. You make a macha. You make a macha. So if that's the determining factor, that's the litmus test whether they can do it or not, right? For example, I'll give you a practical example. I like this example. Kosher phones versus smartphones. This is Xera that the Rabbanan clearly in Eretz Yisrael have made. There should only be kosher phones, no smartphones, no WhatsApp, no Gmail, no internet. They made a Xera. This is obviously not something usher in the Torah. This is a Xera. But we know it's a fact. Most people can't deal with it. They can't live their lives without their smartphones, and most people don't follow their Rabbanan. And yes, they have made a macha. They put up kol kores, they put up signs. But at the end of the day, the question is, after they put up the signs, are Yechol Nabo or not Yechol Nabo? Not Yechol Nabo. We see they have made many machas against us, and people continue to use their smartphones. In which case, the Sibur wins out. The Minhag HaMakom wins out over the Gzeira the Rabbanan. So the Gemara is really asking Shavkinan Luhu. The problem was there was no macha. Why wasn't there macha? If there wasn't a macha, you see that it wasn't because you see that it wasn't really usher. If it was really usher, they would have made a macha. Anyway, that's the determining factor. Sibur could override Gzeira the Rabbanan because the Rabbim have the koach over the mute, even though the mute is the Rabbanan and they're making the Gezeiros. The Sibur, the Hanag of the Sibur ultimately weighs more than the Gzeira the Rabbanan if they're able to withstand it. Otherwise, the Rabbanan, they can make a macha, the Rabbanan. If they make a macha and the Sibur still can't withstand it, then the Sibur overrides Rabbanan. Crazy? That's my pshat. Tell me if you like it or not. Bye.